Hello, listeners, and here is another tranche of Thank Tudor It's Friday, as I work through a variety of questions that have been posed in the comments section on YouTube for the purposes of giving you additional clarity, understanding, and insight into the narcissistic dynamic and the world of narcissism. Without further ado, the first question is posed by Mariposa Axie, who asks, what if your ex-narcissist has someone he introduces to people as his girlfriend, yet he never posts them on social media? Assuming this person is the intimate partner primary source, the fact that they are not being paraded on social media is probably as a consequence of ensuring that the former IPPS, who in effect is deleted, or the narcissist wishes to delete that individual, doesn't know about the relationship, so that the former IPPS does not cause problems. When you're disengaged from and you were the IPPS, in effect, you are deleted. The only time that there will be a continuance of engagement is A, if there is a malice campaign, those are very rare, or B, you keep contacting the narcissist in some way in order, perhaps, to get answers, find closure, even though you won't find closure from us, to perhaps ask for money back, or to recover property, or just basically to tell the narcissist that he's an arsehole. And when you're doing that, your intrusions are unwelcome. Not only will it be unwelcome because you might, for instance, be asking for money back that the narcissist does not want to pay back or cannot pay back, but the narcissist inherently fears that you will interfere in the new relationship with the new intimate partner primary source because you're jealous, envious, you're the hated ex, you're the psycho ex, and therefore you are in effect deleted. And if you keep contacting the narcissist, you'll be ignored, politely told to stay away, and then you'll get malign hoovers. But other than that, where there is no malice campaign, and if you're staying away from us and you are not engaging us in any way, so there's no need for malign hoovers, when the new primary source is kept away from social media, this is all part of the issue of hiding the relationship. And this is done primarily to avoid the former IPPS interfering in some ways. Bellybutton Lint asks, do narcissists view themselves as alpha? The short answer is yes. Lesser narcissists certainly do. They have no awareness and they will consider that they are the bee's knees. And invariably, they are the ones that suffer from the greatest delusion. They are the lower achievers, aside from the upper lesser, who can be successful, but albeit has achieved this in a somewhat crass and bullying fashion. But they will think of themselves as alpha and may well brag or boast about it even though they're not. Mid-range narcissists will similarly view themselves in that way. They think they are more than they actually are. They will be of some capability and achievement, but they will refer to themselves as alpha, but as in a less boastful and less aggressive fashion than the lesser would do so. They would introduce it in a more subtle fashion. Greaters will certainly view themselves as alpha, but will not necessarily make a song and dance about it as much. Why? We let our actions speak for themselves. We let our success speak for ourselves. Invariably with the greater, we don't need to tell you what we are or how we view ourselves. Of course, I do through the purposes of enabling people to understand our mindsets, but in my private life, I would not say to somebody, oh, I'm an alpha male. I don't need to. What I do and what I achieve speaks for itself. And it's a little bit like the Margaret Thatcher, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, with her quotation where she said, if you have to say that you're a lady, you're invariably not. And it's similarly the case here. If you have to keep going on about the fact that you're an alpha, you won't be. Guess which narcissists go on about it? Lessers, mid-rangers. They're not. Greaters don't mention it, although we view ourselves as alpha. We don't mention it because we know what we are and we feel no need to do so. Ninja asks, in The question, what if you share kids and you can't leave but you want to so bad? Well, first of all, good that you so bad want to leave the narcissist. You're obeying the first golden rule of freedom. You can leave, and there are many steps that you can take to ensure that you avoid ensnarement. And while some of them may be difficult, some are actually easier than you'd realise. And you're in luck, because I've recently introduced a consultation which is called How to Co-Parent with a Narcissist. And if you want to learn more about that and receive the assistance package, which will assist you with lots of different facets of co-parenting with a narcissist, pop over to my blog, narcsite.com, and if you go to the search function and put co-parent, the relevant page will come up and all the information is there for you. Angel of Rock asks, can your type get remarried again to the ex of yours before you married? Yes. Somebody who is a former intimate partner primary source always has that label unless they're made the primary source again. So, we may marry somebody, they are the primary source, we disengage, get divorced, they are the former intimate partner primary source, and they will always keep that label unless we hoover, reinstate the formal relationship, and make them the primary source again. We may not remarry them, but they are the intimate partner primary source. We may marry again if our needs determine that that's the appropriate thing to do. Lillian Wasserman asks, I got the comment, I hope you rot in hell. Does that have the same meaning as the narcissist wanting you dead? Well, to understand more about the mindset of the narcissist with regard to wanting you dead, do listen to the video, Why the Narcissist Wants You Dead. But if a narcissist says to you, I hope you rot in hell, what's happening there is it's purely provocation, which is designed to cause you to fountain with fuel. It's not saying it's akin to saying, I wish you'd die, I wish you'd drop dead. But as I've explained, that it's actually very rare for a narcissist to do anything to kill somebody. Why? I'll listen to the video, Why the Narcissist Wants You Dead, and it's explained in greater detail there. But the comment, I hope you rot in hell, is analogous to such comments as, drop dead, I wish you were dead, I'm going to kill you. Wizard of Ahaz asks, I've been ignoring this bitch for 1.5 years now. Well done. But continue to be stalked, showing up at my job, stores I frequent, riding by my house. When does it end? Well, as I've explained previously, it only ends when you die or we die. There is always a risk of a hoover. Why is that? Because there's always a risk of a hoover trigger, because even if you stay out of the first 5 spheres of influence, you may enter the 6th one, which is where we are reminded of you, or we just happen to think about you. Therefore, there is always a risk, even if it is a low one, of a hoover trigger. That means there then follows a risk that there will be a hoover if the criteria for the execution of that hoover are met. What you need to do, and of course is not advocating going and shooting the narcissist, because that will of course land you in serious trouble, but you can minimise the risk by putting in place a firm, robust and total no-contact regime. If you read my book, No Contact, which is available on Amazon, that will tell you plenty more about achieving that. Read Exorcism as well, because that will assist with the process. Do that and you will reduce the risk of hoovers to the very lowest. That will bring with it a reduction in anxiety, peace of mind will come to you, and you will find the process a far easier one. The reality is, because most narcissists are lesser and mid-range, if you make it very difficult for the narcissist to gain fuel from you, gain character traits and residual benefits, here's what happens. The narcissist goes and finds somebody else. Yes, they may come back and have a nibble, subject to the hoover trigger and hoover execution criteria, but if that doesn't work, they'll go away again. And the interlude between hoover attempts, some of which of course you may never find out about if they are unexecuted hoovers, results in a scenario whereby you either don't hear anything for a very long period of time, or if you do, it's infrequent at a low level. It's down to you largely. You put in place that solid no-contact regime, you follow my advice and direction to get your emotional thinking down and keep it down, And in those circumstances, you will reduce the risk of hoovers considerably. Savvy Savage, referring to the A Very series, and in particular the one about Chris Watts, a very murderous narcissist, writes, HG, do one on Trump. Good news, Savvy Savage. There is one about Trump. I haven't got round to recording it yet. You can read about POTUS in A Very POTUS Narcissist by searching for POTUS at narcsite.com. And I give the lowdown on the Donald. You'll find it very interesting. And I'm looking forward to recording that and updating it to incorporate other elements of President Trump's tenure as President of the United States. And while the A Very series is at the forefront of my mind, there will be an update with regard to a very royal narcissist concerning Meghan Markle, which will be of interest. And as I anticipated, I have received comment on the blog and YouTube where people are now seeing that what I said last summer about this individual's behaviour has come to pass. Told you so. And why not bask in a little more praise for me with a comment from Latinas putting, my God, you are good. Right on both fronts. So, Crystal Spears asks, does FaceTime give a narc proximate fuel? The answer is yes. The reason for that is that although you're not physically in the same room, we can see and hear you. And therefore, the amount of fuel that is provided is quite large. What you need to remember is that when it's a question of fuel, when we're talking about proximate fuel, not thought fuel, because thought fuel is what we are thinking about, proximate fuel is what you are actually giving to us. And there are three strands to fuel. First of all, potency. That depends on where you sit in the fuel matrix. Are you a tertiary source? Stranger, very low potency. Are you a secondary source? Non-intimate secondary source. Friend, colleague, family member. Moderate potency. Are you an intimate partner secondary source of the shelf variety or a dirty little secret, for example? Or a candidate intimate partner secondary source? High potency. Are you the intimate partner primary source? Very high potency. Are you the former intimate partner primary source? Extremely high potency. So where you sit in the fuel matrix impacts upon the level of potency, not the amount, the potency. And it's important to remember that. Next, frequency. So if you're having sex with the narcissist for, let's say, an hour, clearly a short session if it was me, in those circumstances, all of the oohs and the ahs and oh my God, and this feels so good, that's fuel being provided frequently for an hour. If it's a text message saying I love you, the frequency of that is a one-off of short duration. Now we come to the amount. A text does not provide a lot of fuel. A short text. Why? Because all we see is the emotion in the words. Speak to us on the telephone, more fuel provided. Why? We hear the words and the tone associated with them. Then, FaceTime, Skype, more fuel again. Why? We hear the words, we hear the tone, we see the facial expression, the body language, the look in your eyes, and thus it increases. And then, of course, physically, besides us, even greater fuel, because you're right next to us, and included on the items that I've just mentioned, there's touch. You might hug us, kiss us, hit us, slap us, and therefore huge amounts of fuel. So we gain the least amount of fuel from a text message, the largest amount of fuel from you physically interacting with us by our side. Your potency is linked to where you come in the fuel matrix, and the frequency is determined, of course, by how long it goes on for. And those are the three elements to it. So with FaceTime, that's proximate fuel. Depending on who's giving it, that affects the potency. If it's an hour-long conversation, the frequency is repeated for an hour. And the amount is fairly significant because we can see and hear you. Menina D'Amato comments that knowing the narcissist sounds like Sam Vaknin. Come on. That's ridiculous. You know it is. How do these delicious baritone, full of timbre, my tones sound like Mr. Vaknin's? There's nothing similar at all. Victoria Hawksworth asks, what would happen if after a speech about the narcissist preventing you from leaving, the woman burst out laughing at him, perhaps called him a bluff or a fraud? Well, if you burst out laughing at a narcissist, we don't like it, unless, of course, we've told you a joke. So if your laughter is derisory or mocking, it's challenge fuel. Why? Because there's an emotion associated with it, laughter. Even if it is contemptuous, it's still an emotion. Therefore, you're not wounding us, but you are challenging us. And therefore, in that challenge, you are saying to us, we're not as good as we think we are. That means we have to put that challenge down, as I've explained in previous videos, and as a consequence, that challenge fuel, whilst we accept the fuel, we have to assert our superiority over you, and the consequence of that is you will receive some form of manipulation in order to put down your rebellion, as it were. If she called him a bluff or a fraud, again, it would depend upon how she does that. It's likely if she's doing it in person, she will do it with fuel because of the look in her eye, facial expression, body language, tone. That means, again, you're not wounding, but you will be challenge fuel. Why? You have emotion with the associated words, thus there's fuel, but calling us a bluff or a fraud is derogatory, and therefore you're challenging us. CL4H asks, what the heck is a mid-range narcissist? There's lots of material in videos and on my blog. Use the search function for mid-range narcissist and it's explained there, along with all of their traits. Just to help, I categorise narcissists by school, so lesser, and you have a lower lesser, middle lesser, upper lesser. Middle range, so lower mid-range, middle mid-range, upper mid-range, and greater. Lower greater, middle greater, and upper greater. And all of those divisions and subdivisions have different traits, different behaviours. Some of them are similar. Some behaviours will appear with regard to all schools of narcissists. Some are particular to certain schools only. Some are more prevalent in other schools. And all of this helps. So, for example, when people talk about covert and overt, I don't like those terms and don't use them. They're too broad. But if I was to embrace them, covert can apply to both greater and mid-range. Overt can apply to both lesser and greater. And I go into greater detail with regard to these divisions and schools of narcissist, so you get more information. There are also the cadres, victim, somatic, cerebral, and elite. And again, that assists you in understanding the nature of the narcissist, his preferences with regard to victims, and what that can mean. And I discuss more of that in the book Sitting Target. Susan comments, you are beyond sick. Well, I'm assuming, Susan, if you're suggesting that I and my brethren are beyond sick, we mustn't be sick. We must be better. And of course, as I often say to people, don't be bitter, just be better. And that's a more satisfactory outcome for all. So, Brenda Barney, I love your voice, very well put. You've helped me so much. Thank you. You're most welcome, Brenda. And pleased to assist. Brandon Guy comments, I've always been curious as to why I'm blocked and unblocked all of the time. Of course, the reason for that is it's all about the exertion of control over you. Part of that is done with regard to a silent treatment, and if the blocking is extensive and across all platforms, you've been disengaged from. So take, for example, you might be blocked on WhatsApp, but not on Facebook or, say, Twitter. Excuse me. And the narcissist hasn't blocked your telephone number. So that's a corrective devaluation, for instance, if you're a secondary source, which is being done to give you a form of silent treatment. If you're blocked across all platforms and you can't get in touch with the narcissist, you've been disengaged from, and there lies the difference. And of course, we might block you at 10 o'clock in the morning across all platforms, and then there's a hoover trigger and we hoover you and we unblock you again by midday, and we've engaged with you again. And it's all about what our needs are, and they will change by turning on a sixpence. So in those instances, the frequent blocking and unblocking is all about the exertion of control. That other dude asks, how will a narcissist respond to being dumped during the golden period or at the beginning of the devaluation? Well, the answer is badly. If you escape us, even though that's exceptionally rare for that to happen during the golden period, for reasons which should be obvious to listeners, if that does happen, then, dependent upon where you are at and your position within the fuel matrix, you may face an initial Grand Hoover of particular ferocity. Because if you're the primary source and you're in the golden period and then you escape, we will fight to retain you. And in those circumstances, the initial Grand Hoover is as is set out in my book, No Contact. If you're a secondary source in the golden period and you escape us, again, extremely rare, but if you do, you will probably be hoovered to try and retain you, but there will not be as much effort deployed by the narcissist as there would be if you were a primary source. Similarly, if you get rid of us at the beginning of the devaluation, if you're the primary source, it's highly unlikely that we will have your replacement ready, and therefore you will face an initial Grand Hoover to keep you in place. If we are devaluing a secondary source, and it's usually a corrective devaluation that's occurring, if that causes you to escape us, then again, you may face some hoovering to try and draw you back in. But if we've got lots of secondary sources, the narcissist invariably instinctively determines that you're not actually needed. You are disposable because we have more secondary sources available to us. If there are only a few, the narcissist will either try and recruit a new one or hoover you to retain you. But it's the primary source who is the one that is hoovered the hardest by way of initial Grand Hoover. Why? Because the primary source provides for lesser and mid-range narcissists in particular the bulk of their fuel, character traits and residual benefits. That's why they're their primary source. They're hugely important to the narcissist. And if you escape at any time during golden period or devaluation, you will receive an initial Grand Hoover to bring you back into line, to reinstate the fuel supply, and to ensure that all is well within the world of the narcissist. So there we are. Further answers for you on a Friday to assist you in understanding. And as always, if you have detailed questions about your personal circumstances where you need to give me a lot of information and I need to convey a lot of information to you for the purposes of accuracy, please do book a consultation with me. You'll find them extremely useful. Otherwise, if you've got generic questions about narcissism or short questions about your circumstances or any question at all, for example, what type of socks do I prefer to wear? Or where might I be going travelling next week? Or where will I be going on holiday in 2 months' time? Feel free to ask. And if I'm viewing you as white, I'll answer you. Enjoy your Friday, everybody. This is HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.